So welcome to tonight's meeting of the Port Phillip City Council. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands we meet from today. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present, and we acknowledge and uphold their continuing relationship to this land. So we're meeting tonight in a hybrid format with the councillors, officers and some members of the public joining us here in the Town Hall and then online, albeit under strict conditions. Now, this meeting is being streamed via Council's webcast page and Facebook Live. Just to let you know, the streams and recordings of Council meetings are copyrighted and cannot be altered, reproduced or republished without the permission of Council. And whilst we operate in an online mode, as we come to know that there is the risk of technical issues, and if they should occur, we will adjourn to see if we can resolve the issue. And if not, we will adjourn the meeting to a later date and let you know when that will be as soon as possible. I will remind all attendees that anyone participating in tonight's meeting must extend due courtesy and respect to Council and the processes to which it operates under, and must take direction from the Chair whenever called on to do so. Speakers must remain respectful, and statements or questions must not be defamatory, offensive or objectionable, aimed at embarrassing a councillor or a member of Council staff, or relate to a matter outside the powers of the Council. So, councillors, do we have any apologies tonight? We're all here, so we'll move on to agenda item number 2, which is the minutes of the previous meetings. So, councillors, the minutes of the council meeting held on the 16th of June 2021 and special meetings held on the 23rd and 28th of June 2021 have been circulated. Are there any questions regarding these minutes? If there are none, can I have a motion to confirm these minutes? Councillor Martin to move, Councillor Pearl to second. I will now put the motion. All those in favour? That motion is passed. Declaration of conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts, councillors? No? So we shall move to item 4, which is public question time and submissions. So we will now hear all the public questions and comments on particular report items from members of the public. All requests to speak were required to be submitted by 4 p.m. this afternoon. And I just will remind councillors, when not speaking or eating or drinking, please wear your masks as per the state government's COVID restrictions. Okay, so the first person I'd like to call upon who is online is Brenda Forbath, speaking to item 13.1, the Local Festivals Fund, Revised Guidelines and Criteria. Brenda, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Could you state your name and suburb and then please speak away?
Thank you. Brenda Forbath, Elwood, 3184. Thank you, councillors. I'm wishing to address item 13.1, Local Festivals Fund, Revised Guidelines and Criteria. I object to the following new provisions in the revised guidelines, and that is, and I quote from the guidelines, that organisations or groups who are assessed to have undertaken or intend to undertake significant activity on political advocacy will not be eligible to receive funding from this fund. Further on, there is a clarification of what is meant by significant activity on political advocacy, which is also unacceptable, and it's, I say, a limitation on free speech. I refer here to the words, a group that has campaigns in the community and or advocates to council for the same or similar policy positions as a registered political party or parties, and also the words, a group that has consistently and repeatedly advocated to council on proposed or existing policies, programs or councils. I say that those words should be removed. And I say that because it will prevent community groups from engaging with council by way of submissions, letters, questions at council meetings on all council policies and programs unless they have been invited to do so by formal engagement. It will not be open to groups or individuals to raise concerns or suggest and advocate for particular changes or additions to existing or proposed council programs or policies, because by doing so, they will become ineligible for funds under the Local Festivals Fund. These provisions are both retrospective and prospective. If a group is guilty of having come to council raising issues about programs and policies outside of the formal engagement, a formal invitation to engage with council in the past, it will immediately become ineligible for funding. Such a group will not have the opportunity to correct its behaviour. If the panel making funding decisions determines that a group intends to undertake such activity in the future, they will also be ineligible. And of course, it is very unclear on what basis the panel could make such an assessment. I also raise the question, will these provisions relating to significant activity on political advocacy also apply to all other council funding grants programs? If not, why not? Such a dramatic and astonishing curtailment of community engagement with council has not been subject to any community consultation. And unless council makes a decision tonight to remove these elements from its new guidelines, it should defer a final decision until a broad community consultation has been undertaken. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Brenda. Also online, I call upon Stephen Pennells. Are you there, Stephen?
Yes.
And you've got a question for council? If you could state your name and suburb, please, sir.
Stephen Pennells, Port Melbourne.
Yep, Stephen.
With current compost, yes. With current compost bins nearing capacity again, would council like to trial a 245 litre eco tumbler dual compartment, easy turn allegedly, rotating compost bin at Centenary Reserve, unfenced community gardens, please? Thank you.
I think we're going to have an officer to respond to that, Stephen, straight away. Do I have Lachlan Johnson?
Through you, Mayor, I'll take Stephen's question on notice. I can provide a detailed response on the opportunities at Centenary Reserve, noting that Council has some existing composting and community FOGO initiatives that may be relevant. We also need to consider the opportunities as part of the community garden policy. So I'll take the question on notice and provide an answer in the minutes.
Thank you, Lachlan. I call upon Rhonda Small, speaking to item 13.1, Local Festivals Fund Revised Guidelines and Criteria. Rhonda, you know the drill. It's a new button. Is it a different? No, that's all right. We'll help you out.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. My name's Rhonda Small and I live in St Kilda. And I speak tonight as a long-term resident and community activist in the city, and also on behalf of Progressive Port Phillip, who's already been very much impacted by local festival fund decision-making. We have serious concerns about the proposed amendments to the eligibility criteria for the local festivals fund. Can I take my mask off to speak? On two grounds. First, they would exclude a wide range of community groups whose activities include advocacy, that is, groups who have made repeated approaches to council on proposed or existing policies and programs of council, would not be eligible to apply for grants. It is hard to think of any community group who would not be impacted and alarmed by this. Second, the amendments introduced an additional targeted prohibition on groups based on their actual or intended engagement in political communication and advocacy. That a group is politically active seems entirely irrelevant to the subject matter, scope and purpose of the fund and Council's responsibilities for its proper management. Preliminary legal advice received would indicate that these proposed amendments are also not consistent with Council's obligations under the Victorian Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities. The proposed revisions would directly discriminate against people based on their political belief or activity, which is a protected attribute under Victoria's Equal Opportunity Act of 2010. As a public authority, Council must act compatibly with the rights protected by the Charter. Have council officers considered council's legal obligations in framing these revisions? Have council officers also considered the impact these amended guidelines will have on community confidence in council's capacity to administer the fund fairly and reasonably in the interests of the community as a whole? I urge councillors to reject these amended guidelines tonight. Should they be passed, I and others will be taking our concerns to the local government minister, our local state member and the Victorian Ombudsman. Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon Bill Garner, speaking to item 13.1, which is Local Festivals Fund Revised Guidelines and Criteria. Thanks, Bill. If you could state your name and suburb and please speak.
My name is Bill Garner. I live in St Kilda. I wish to address the proposed eligibility criteria for the Local Festivals Fund. Quite simply, Madam Mayor and councillors, they are unworkable. Councillors cannot shelter behind the audit of the fund because that audit found no problems with eligibility. Changing the rules was something initiated by councillors who then left it to officers to attempt to make sense of what was obviously a set of incompatible, indeed self-contradictory demands. The result is a mess. A politically driven narrowing of eligibility effectively contradicts the original intent to encourage the broadest community involvement in local festivals. Instead, the proposed changes pave the way for unintended consequences so severe as to undermine the proper functioning of the fund. The range of community groups that could be ruled ineligible for advocating to council makes a mockery of council's much-touted engagement policy. The chilling effect is grave. This is not an issue for councillors to decide amongst themselves. The constituency of potentially impacted groups and citizens should have a voice. Will councillors tonight either reject or defer the motion to allow for community consultation? Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon Christina Kinst, speaking to item 13.1, Local Festivals Fund Revised Guidelines and Criteria. Christina, you also know the drill? Great.
My name's Christina Kinst. I live in St Kilda. Good evening, Mayor and councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to address my submission to the points raised by a former speaker, Brenda Forbath. That is points 2 and 3 of the definition of significant activity on political advocacy, and as well as the inclusion of a group's intentions. I find both quite a worry. If passed tonight, these criteria will make the assessment process unwieldy and akin to an inquisition. The panel will need to scrutinise the political views of the applicant, count the number of times the applicant has engaged uninvited with council policies, compare the applicant's programs to the policies of political parties, and delve into the applicant's future intentions. How do you even do that? If passed tonight, these criteria will potentially knock out the eligibility of a whole range of the most actively engaged groups across the city. Port Phillip organisations that seek to consistently and repeatedly influence council policy on, for example, First Nations, arts, environment, LGBTIQ, multicultural and more, will be excluded from council support for their local neighbourhood festivals, regardless of the merits of the proposed festival content. The revised criteria should be voted down tonight before the draconian cancer spreads to the proposed festival's content, and then to other cultural and community grants. Just yesterday, I received notification that the annual community grants are open. The criteria for the community grants are nothing like the criteria proposed here. I have a question, and I hope you can answer it tonight. Does Council intend to revise eligibility criteria for all other grants along the same lines as we are seeing tonight? And if not, why has the local festival fund been singled out? Thank you.
A councillor may take up your question. Thank you. I now call upon Jennifer Edge, who has a question for Council. Jen, you know the drill as well.
I'd like to acknowledge the Bunurong elders, past, present and emerging, and the fact that they never ceded sovereignty. Thanks for this opportunity to speak. My name is Jen Edge. I live in St Kilda, and your indulgence, 3 quick questions. First one is, for some time I've been asking to receive the agenda in hard copy by post. It's simple, you just fold it in 3, put it in a small envelope and post it. But instead what's been happening is I've been receiving late only the agenda, and that costs 3 times as much and takes 3 times as long to go through the post. DL size post, it transmits much quicker. So if I could get that agenda quickly and regularly, then I might have it in time to indicate my request to speak should I wish to do so. Thanks in advance. The other issue I wish to raise is the difficulty of accessing the car park, the Palais car park. Often I find when I go down there, the area in front of the Palais has been blocked off by Live Nation staff. Can Council request Live Nation to put out a notice, a sandwich board or something beforehand with their intention to close entry access to the Palais car park beforehand, stating times of closing and reopening, please? And the final one was a surprise tonight down there. Along the foreshore, the rubbish bins have been fitted with mini QR code stickers on each of the bins. Is that a council thing, and can somebody enlighten the community about those? Finally, I'd like to concur with the previous speakers about 13.1. I find it extraordinary. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Do I have an officer wanting to respond, or we'll take those on notice? Take it on notice, so we'll take that up. Thanks, Jen. We do have a few further submissions to be read out on behalf of members of the public. So I may need Kirsty for this, or I can read the questions out myself. Would you prefer? I'm happy to do that. Sorry to interrupt. So I'm going to call out the name of each member of the public, and then Kirsty will read out a summary of the submissions. So first question is Adrian Jackson.
Through you, Mayor, the submission reads, what is Council doing to realistically reduce household waste? The 240-litre bins should be withdrawn from residences and replaced with 120-litre bins before the next rates notice. I oppose the FOGO bin proposal, as there should be no food waste, and a third extra bin will require more staff to procure, maintain and distribute these bins to residents, and more rubbish collection services to collect 3 bins separately. What will happen to the food waste after it is collected from residents' properties?
I realise I missed someone in the public to speak, so I'll come back to that. I believe, Lachlan, you're responding to this one?
Through you, Mayor. Council's Don't Waste It waste management strategy outlines the initiatives, projects and advocacy efforts that Council is implementing to reduce waste from the city that goes to landfill. Under the state government's circular economy policy, Recycling Victoria, the City of Port Phillip, like all Victorian local governments, is required to provide a food organics and garden organics, FOGO, service over the coming years. Simply rolling out an additional bin to all properties in the City of Port Phillip is not likely to deliver the outcomes espoused in Don't Waste It. Council is currently investigating how best this service can be delivered effectively in a cost-efficient manner. Council has an ongoing curbside FOGO service in Elwood, serving approximately 400 properties. We're also trialling a communal food organics drop-off service in some of the higher density areas of the municipality. And Council is also working with owners' corporations of a number of high-rise multi-unit developments to trial specific curbside food-only collection services. Officers are currently evaluating these programs and using this information to inform an update to Don't Waste It that will be completed later this year. Organics collected through these various initiatives, the Green Waste Book Collection Service and drop-offs to the Resource and Recovery Centre in South Melbourne, are provided to a processor in southeast Melbourne. The material is composted and, depending on the quality of the product, made available for reuse in horticultural and landscape settings. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is my remiss. I do have someone also to speak to a report before we continue on with the questions. So sorry about this. I call on Anne Byrne, also speaking to item 13.1, which is the Local Festivals Fund. And if you could state your name and suburb. The button at the bottom, it's the same as ours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, for this opportunity to speak. My name is Anne Byrne and I live in St Kilda. I am here as a representative of the Community Alliance of Port Phillip and speak on item 13.1, particularly the definitions of who funding is not available to, namely a group that has campaigns in the community and or advocates to council for the same or similar policy positions as a registered political party, a group that has consistently repeatedly advocated to council. I'm quite confused, so I have a whole range of questions. I'm confused as to why council would have such a policy that limits advocacy by their constituents. Does this definition mean that organisations that advocated for additional arts funding in the recent budget discussions will not be eligible for any festival funds, as they would be deemed to have consistently and repeatedly advocated to council? In reviewing policy positions of political parties, I note that most parties have policies on the arts, childcare, rights of First Nations peoples, equality, climate change and many other matters. Does the definition of campaigns mean that local organisations advocating on any of these issues have no rights to funding under the Festival Fund? Will this definition or criteria be used for all funding activities? And if it's only for the Festival Fund, why? It's very difficult to understand why the City of Port Phillip would wish to tarnish its reputation by not allowing organisations that are passionate about improving the city and its amenities to apply for funding for local festivals activity. As the implications of these guidelines are so wide-ranging, CAP requests that Council consult the community on these guidelines and tonight reject them and ask for more appropriate guidelines to be developed. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. We'll go back to questions to be referred to the Head of Governance. So if we could read the next question from Adrian Jackson, please.
Through you, Mayor, the question reads, why is the Council increasing rates despite the hardship caused to businesses and residents affected by the COVID-19 and associated government restrictions and periodic lockdowns?
Dennis O'Keefe.
Through you, Mayor, and I thank Mr Jackson for his question. All other things being equal, Council's cost of services grow each year in response to inflation. The rates cap essentially represents the allowance set by the state for councils to fund this inflation impact through our key revenue source, that is rates. The 1.5% rates cap set by the Victorian Government applies to the total rates revenue that council can raise in 2021-22. This excludes any additional properties added during the current financial year, 2020 to 21. The rates increase is needed to fund the cost of services that council wishes to provide to the community and fund a $43 million capital portfolio program to ensure we look after our $3.2 billion portfolio of community assets while balancing the budget over not only today, but also the long term. The costs of providing council services to our community are escalating at a higher rate than the rate cap, particularly in waste services due to landfill levies and associated costs. We've been able to offset the escalating costs through a continued strong focus on prudent financial management, careful prioritisation and commitment to productivity and efficiency. We have achieved $2.3 million of efficiency savings in the budget 21-22, in addition to the $12.6 million over the 4 budgets of the previous council, totalling cumulative savings of $54 million. Council acknowledges the impact of COVID-19 and associated government restrictions and periodic lockdowns on many of our residents and businesses. For the 2021-22 financial year, Council has increased the pensioner rebate to $200 and increased the one-off waiver provision to $1,500 to a maximum of 50% of general rates. Details on eligibility and application process for the waiver will be confirmed in the 2021-22 rates notice. Council has also provided within its capacity significant support to businesses impacted by COVID-19 over both 2019-20 and 2020-21 financial years, and will work with the business community in 21-22 where applicable to support the economic recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. We have another question from Adrian Jackson.
Through you, Mayor, the question reads, what is the role of the Multicultural Advisory Committee as it relates to Commonwealth responsibility?
Tony Keenan.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr Jackson, for your question. The Multicultural Advisory Committee assists Council by providing advice and feedback on all issues that affect the City of Port Phillip's multicultural communities. Council's vision in the recently adopted Council Plan highlights that social cohesion, forged from understanding, celebrating and listening to the diverse cultures in our city is the foundation for success. Community engagement during the development of the plan emphasised the benefits to Port Phillip of its culturally rich and diverse population. The committee has been instrumental in guiding Council to focus federal government's attention and funding to support a number of priority local outcomes. This includes the use of Commonwealth Home Support Program, sector support and development funding to provide direct support for a number of multicultural seniors groups in Port Phillip, and also last year the Commonwealth COVID-19 emergency support funding to deliver digital literacy programs and prevent social isolation for some recently arrived communities. Whilst Council recognised the role of federal government in multicultural affairs, this does not diminish the value of the Council's role in multicultural issues for the community and in the value of the Multicultural Advisory Committee in informing Council decision making.
Thanks, Tony. So this question is from Moira Deeming.
Through you, Mayor, the question reads, under Victorian law, is it legal for local government councils to provide sex-based / targeted services and facilities separately to gender identity-based / targeted services and facilities? If not, why not? For example, can council legally put signs on a set of public toilets declaring that one is for biological males, one is for biological females, and one is for people with transgender identities? If not, why not?
Tony?
Through you, Mayor, thank you for the question. and it's timely to remind Council of its obligations under relevant legislation. Both Federal Sex Discrimination Act 1994, as amended by the Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity and Intersex Status Amendment Act 2013, as well as the Victorian Equal Opportunity Act 2010, prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex, gender identity or intersex status. Under this law, it is discriminatory to require a person who is transgender to use a toilet which does not align with their gender identity. The Gender Equality Act 2020, which is Victorian legislation, highlights the need also to redress disadvantage, address stigma, stereotyping, prejudice and violence against persons of different genders, and enhance social participation by persons of different genders. There will be a number of opportunities for Council to consider further improvements to ensure appropriate toilet facilities for all residents within the city. Council has recently endorsed the establishment of an LGBTIQA+ advisory committee and the development of a diversity inclusion action plan, and it is hoped that these initiatives will assist the Council in this matter. Council will be reviewing its public toilet strategy in the near future, and that will again provide an opportunity to ensure toilets are compliant with our legal obligations to meet the needs of all members of the community.
We have one more. It's a statement from Gail Hastings in regard to the Local Festivals Fund, which is item 13.1.
Through you, Mayor, the statement reads, I support Progressive Port Phillip in their advocacy for a no vote against the new grant eligibility criteria. I do so on the basis the criteria intellectually discriminates against the self-determination of art practitioners via the Council's political censorship of the programs that we'll support. Discrimination against self-determination disables cultural sincerity and cripples the creative ingenuity sincerity breeds.
Thank you. Moving on to councillor question time. Councillors, do we have any questions for the officers? Councillor Consolo.
Pardon me. I've noticed there isn't soap in our public bathrooms. For many, such as those with young children, we can't avoid public toilets, especially at the heightened time of personal hygiene. Why does Council not provide soap? And what would be the process to get soap in public toilets?
Lachlan Johnson.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Consolo, for your question. Council used to provide soap and paper towel in public facilities, but stopped doing so a number of years ago due to increased incidences of theft and of vandalism. This was costing Council approximately $50,000 per annum, and decided to, so as such, Council decided to step away from providing those facilities in Council public toilets.
I think there was a second part to that question, if possible, Lachlan? Councillor Consolo?
Yeah, just if we wanted to bring that back, what's the process?
Sorry, through you, Mayor. Councillor Consolo, officers, if Council directs officers to investigate options, we can go away and provide a report back to Council on what the options would be to reinstitute soap and paper towel in the facilities and what the potential cost implications could be.
And just to clarify, it would need to be a notice of motion. Yeah.
Yes, correct.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for councillors? For officers? Let's not ask each other questions. That would be dangerous. Any other questions for officers? If not, let's move along. We actually have a ceiling schedule item. I don't know why it's exciting, but it is. So, the item is 6.1, which is the contract for security patrol services. Are there any questions for the officers in relation to this report? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something different? Councillor Copsey to move, Councillor Pearl to second. Councillor Copsey. Councillor Pearl? Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? If not, let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Unusually, so we've had a sealing schedule item, but now for petitions and joint letters we have none tonight, which is item 7. So let's move along to the presentation of reports. So we're going to start with 8.1, which is the CEO report, issue 76. Councillors, are there any questions for the officers in regard to this report? No? Councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something different? Councillor Pearl to move. Councillor Copsey to second. Councillor Pearl. Councillor Copsey.
I will just note it's a fantastic report as usual with some real milestones secured and in particular calling out Eco Centre funding and the continued success of the Renew Fitzroy Street project. A fantastic read for things that are getting done in the city, and I thank the CEO and staff for the time that goes into preparing this report.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? If not, we'll go back to Councillor Pearl to close. No, that's all right. Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Moving on to 9.1, which is the Multicultural Advisory Committee, the appointment of members from 2021 to 2024. Now, councillors, while we get that up on the screen, do we have any questions for the officers? No? If not, do we have someone to move the officer's recommendation? Councillor Baxter, and do I have a seconder? Councillor Martin? Yes. Yeah, we need... Oh, we have got the names in already? Great. That's correct. Yep. So, Councillor Baxter, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, I'll just say that having been appointed by Council as Council's delegate to the Multicultural Advisory Committee, I have started to get to know the group and the people that were already on there before these appointments. That really impressed me with their capability and their amazing capacity to offer our city and our council their knowledge and their expertise. So I was already really impressed with the committee as it was, and these new appointments are also, I would say, equally impressive. And I'm really looking forward to what this committee can achieve with people like this on it.
Who seconded? Councillor Martin.
Madam Mayor, I welcome any opportunity to congratulate those members of our community who put their hands up to join our local advisory committees. These committees do an amazing job. These people give up their own time, and the advice that they provide to council is invaluable, and I commend all of these appointments, and I'm too delighted to second this motion.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Consolo.
I'm always impressed by the number of different countries represented at our citizenship ceremonies, but walking around the streets, at least where I live, it's not as obvious. This advisory committee is a great link. 31.4% of the population in the city of Port Phillip were born overseas, including me. But sitting here, we aren't the most diverse group of councillors, so we're fortunate to have this wonderful committee volunteering their time to ensure the policies and issues are appropriate for our diverse community. So thank you very much.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Copsey.
The only thing I'll add is it's in the motion, but I did want to thank the outgoing members who have contributed their expertise and a significant amount of time, and I'm sure a lot of passion through their term as well. And that includes the individuals who have served on the committee, but also the outgoing organisations, the Brigidine Asylum Seekers Project and Jewish Care, who've made a great contribution. Thank you very much.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I will briefly. It's echoing many of the sentiments expressed by other councillors, but the depth of knowledge around many things, whether it's the arts or, I guess, different ethnicities and cultures, blows me away, and I wish as a council we actually had more time to spend with the various advisory communities and drawing on their wealth of knowledge. And it is incredible, the expertise and the depth of understanding of different cultures that we have in our city. And I know that we are a better city already for the very many migrants and groups that have come to the City of Port Phillip, and I look forward to the contribution to be made by these new members of this committee. So would anyone like to, Councillor Baxter, would you like to close? No. Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. We're moving on to 12.1, which is the preparation and exhibition of Amendment C 203 Port Planning Scheme Review. Councillors, do we have any questions for the officers? Councillor Martin.
Madam Mayor, through you, this is a huge body of work that's gone into this by our planning department, and I have struggled to get my head around all the documents myself. Through you, Madam Mayor, can we ask your officers, how will our members of the good citizens of Port Phillip be able to view this document? How will they be directed to those things that may affect them, and how will they have an opportunity to have any comment on the document itself if the motion is carried?
Catherine Pound, if you could respond, please.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. The next step in the process will be a public exhibition period, which we anticipate being in September. That will go for 1 month. That will be in accordance with a communications and engagement plan, which sets out a number of ways in which we inform the community, with an emphasis on really making it as understandable as possible, and we're working with our communications and strategies team on doing that, because there is a lot of complexity to this amendment, and it's really, communication is important. So part of the exhibition will also involve drop-in sessions, where we have some around heritage in particular and some in general, with the opportunity to talk directly to officers and our heritage advisor. We will also have a very comprehensive Have Your Say page on the website as well, and officers will be available to talk to anyone who wishes or has questions throughout the whole process as well. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for officers? I might ask a quick one. As part of letting the people know that the exhibition's on, do we do things like email all the people who have responded to various planning issues, that we do have the email addresses of? Obviously, we don't have a comprehensive database. Is that part of what we also do, to let them know that there is that big scheme being looked at?
Because this amendment affects the entire local content within the planning scheme, we won't be directly notifying everyone. However, we will be directly notifying certain groups, including anyone who's previously been engaged with as part of the heritage program, including anyone who's directly affected. There are some obsolete controls we're seeking to remove from specific properties, so those people will be directly notified. And as well as some statutory obligations for direct notification. Otherwise, we'll just be making the information available more generally to the community. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this, or something different? Councillor Copsey to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Martin.
I'll just reserve, thanks.
Councillor Martin.
Very briefly, Madam Mayor, I was particularly attracted to reading those sections of this document that related to what's in my own ward, in Gateway Ward, and I have learnt an awful lot about some of the planning issues in my ward over the last few weeks as I've gone through those sections of the document I've had a look at. Can I just commend Catherine and her team on the enormous amount of work that they've done? There's so much information in there, and I hope that anyone with any interest in planning in the City of Port Phillip takes the time to have a look at these documents, look at the sections that are relevant to them, and if they think the need, to contact our council officers to seek clarification about any point, because, yeah, an amazing amount of work, and congratulations to the team that's put the document together.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Copsey? Good. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. All right, so we are moving on to item 13.1, but the CEO has taken leave to make a statement.
Through you, Mayor, thank you. Through you, Mayor, I'm seeking your consent to remove item 13.1 from tonight's agenda. Under Governance Rule 19, The CEO, with the consent of the Chair, can at any time after the agenda has been distributed remove a matter and give notice as soon as practical. Apologies for the very late notice. However, under clause 69.2, I'm required of the governance rules, I'm required to advise to the best of my knowledge if a proposed resolution or action is contrary to the law, and also advise if there are operational, financial or risk implications arising from a proposed resolution. We've had at late notice this afternoon, and indeed some of the public speakers have raised some questions, a number of questions around the officer's recommendation and report, and we haven't had a chance to seek legal advice in relation to answer those questions. So I seek your leave, Mayor, to remove this item whilst we can obtain that legal advice and also consider some other questions that have been raised which may have implications for Council's ability to consider the motion.
I am happy to agree to that. So that item will move on from 13.1 to 13.2, which is the proposed discontinuance and sale of roads R3187 and part R4053, which abut 454 to 456 City Road, South Melbourne. Councillors, do we have any questions for officers? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover or something different? Anyone to move? Councillor Copsey and Councillor Pearl is a second. Councillor Copsey. Councillor Pearl? Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? No? Head back to Councillor Copsey. No? Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. 13.3. This is the intention to sell Parcel A, which is 39 to 47 Camden Street, Balaclava, and reporting of submissions in response to public notice. Councillors, any questions? No questions for the officers on this one? Okay, then I have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover or and a seconder? I'll move it. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sirikoff, thank you. I reserve my right to speak. Councillor Sirikoff, would anyone else like to speak? No, I'll quickly say a word. This is quite a big step forward in this looking the long-term revitalisation, well not revitalisation but development around Carlisle Street and what the vision, the long-term vision will be. So, yeah, it's interesting as we go down this process. We are looking to improve that part of our municipality, and I know it's a long way to go, but we're heading down a certain path, so I just wanted to acknowledge that moment. Councillors, let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. Now, notice of intention to sell 174 Nott Street, Port Melbourne, and we're considering the submissions of response. Councillors, do you have any questions for the officers? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Martin to move. Councillor Crawford to second. Councillor Martin.
Reserve.
I don't need to speak to it. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item, the motion? Councillor Martin, back to you.
Just thank the officers involved in preparing the documentation here. This is a property that's probably not something that should be in the province of council, and I think this is an excellent move to move it off the council's property register.
Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. We are moving on to 13.5, which is the records of informal meetings of council. Councillors, do we have any questions? Wow, we are moving fast. Okay. Do I have a mover and seconder for item 13.5 report? Councillor Copsey, seconded by Councillor Martin. Councillor Copsey. Councillor Martin, anyone else? All right, let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried unanimously. Okay, item 13.6, which is the Optus Billing Services contract variation. Councillors, tell me you have some questions for officers. Councillor Martin.
This is a significant sum of money that is an alteration to the original contract. In the documentation that's been provided in the package, it's explained that we're not committing additional funds. The money's going to come from savings. Through you, Madam Mayor, can one of the council officers just to explain to the councillors and to those people who are watching us where the additional costs have come from and how we're going to manage this without dipping into any additional council funds?
I believe I'm going to Manaha Esaparapu. Are you online, Manaha?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor.
Thank you.
There are predominantly three areas where we described where the cost escalation has happened. One is due to the COVID and the ways of working, the remote working, and it has escalated in terms of the service costs that we have provided, which includes additional data consumption as well. Beyond that, anything that has been considered part of the contract variation has been appropriately budgeted, but it was not factored part of the Optus mobile contract estimates. And all the additional costs that we are incurring due to COVID and the ways of working have been offset with savings that we made with major project improvements and optimizations that we have done in the last 6 to 8 months.
Are there any other further questions? No? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Martin, and a seconder, Councillor Copsey. Councillor Martin.
I urge Council to support this motion. Reason one, of course, is that if we don't support the motion, we may not have any telephone services coming up in the next few weeks. Reason two, though, is that because of savings in other areas, this is no additional cost to the Council. So, A, we're not committing any additional funds, and B, it's essential that we have full telephonic communication service operating in the Council. I urge you to vote for it.
Councillor Copsey. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No? Councillor Martin. Are you contemplating it? Did you want to close? All right, let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That has carried unanimously. Councillors, we have no notices of motion tonight, which is item 15, but we will move on to 16, which is reports by councillor delegates. Would anyone like to report back? I won't even say briefly. You've got time. Councillor Copsey.
I will report back as Council's delegate to SECA, the South Eastern Climate Change Alliance, with councils, and recently a number of councillors attended the SECA Leadership Breakfast, which is usually a wonderful chance for us to get together with councillors from across our region and talk about regional priorities for addressing climate risk and the opportunities for addressing that successfully. It was held online this year instead, and we received a really very informative presentation regarding insurance and the realities of managing climate risk across our region, which of course is an issue that Council is keenly aware of and looking to address over our newly adopted 10-year outlook and plan. So it was a really fantastic event still. I look forward to us being able to do it in person on the next occasion, but as usual, a wonderful, informative presentation and a great chance to connect with the other councillors and officer representatives on SECA from across the region.
Any other council delegates would like to report back? Councillor Martin.
Given that we're finishing very early, if I'll just take 60 seconds of your time. And again, I'm amazed at the wonderful people we have in the City of Port Phillip and the various groups that I work with. And firstly, can I commend the Older Persons Advisory Committee, OPAC, which held the first meeting of its new committee. We have 9 new members, and again, the diversity in that committee, as Councillor Baxter has referred to the diversity in the Multicultural Committee, we have such a variety of people. They are so keen and they are so eager. We are so lucky to have these people prepared to put their hand up. Wearing my hat as a Housing First board member, the group of people on their board are fantastic at putting together submissions to get additional social housing projects up and running. There are going to be some very positive announcements coming out of Housing First in the near future. We've already got the Marlborough Street developments up and running, which I think, as something we're all delighted about, and there'll be several more announcements coming in the near future. I sit on the Bubba Wabajeka Kindergarten Board, and again, a group of people. I was on the kindergarten board many years ago, and I have to say the level of expertise on this board is 100 times greater than the board that I sat on 25 years ago when my kids were young. We have so many amazing people out there in the city of Port Phillip. And last but not least, Madam Mayor, you and I would you like to report to the rest of Council on our experience this morning down at Park Towers? The Artists for Kids Trust Group have been working with some of the children at Park Towers on some holiday programs. We went down there today, and the Mayor and I saw a group of children working with a ceramicist doing some fantastic work there. They're going to get all the faces they made fight. And Madam Mayor, I believe that you've actually made one of your own ceramic artworks that's going to be fired as well. So I look forward to seeing your work on display with the work of the 4-year-olds that we saw at Park Towers this morning.
Mine was rather simplistic, I must say. Are there any other councillor delegates that would like to report back? I will do a brief one as the council representative on the Linden Arts Board, which is an impressive board at all times. And it's kind of, I guess, a long bow, but I wanted to mention something that is slightly outside the municipality. But there is an amazing exhibit of the works of Patricia Piccinini, which is happening upstairs in Flinders Station. Now, one of the things you may not know is Patricia, in her early days of her career, was exhibited at Linden, and that's the kind of the value that Linden does in supporting mid-career artists, so really helps people take those next steps into becoming a much more known and established artist, and look where people end up. So it's actually really exciting to know that very early on her work started here in the city of Port Phillip, and I wanted to acknowledge the great work that Linden has done over a very long period of time for many, many fabulous artists in Australia that have got a foot up in the city of Port Phillip. And she stayed at your sister-in-law's? Ah, okay. I didn't. And the other quick one I wanted to mention is that there is a new advocacy group that has started officially called M9, which replaces an IMAP, which is a grouping of 9 council represented by the Mayor and the CEO, which is an advocacy body to work together on our shared issues. And so that's a new undertaking that we are committed to for a year. And I'm excited to weigh the possibility of this advocacy of 9 inner city councils, what will be possible. Any other councillors wish to make it? All right, well, we'll move on to urgent items of business. Councillors, do we have any urgent items of business? Okay, confidential matters. We do not have any confidential matters tonight, so there being no further business. And can I do it? Yes, we have done an hour. No further business. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you, everyone.